Before we get started, I do want to mention that when I went to go download Google Docs onto my phone to write the script for this video, the first suggestion that popped up when I typed G in the App Store was Grindr, so that's gotta be a microaggression of some sort, right? I would think. Anyways, today I'm gonna be doing one of those videos where I just kind of talk about a thing for a few minutes and hope that it turns out coherent in any sort of way. But I really hate gambling. I don't hate gambling per se. I mean, I don't think it's too much of a problem to partake in a, like, let me put together a couple parlays and forget about it for a week type of way, but not so much the, my entire cost of living relies on if Breece Hall throws a flea flicker touchdown way, which is mostly what I'm gonna be talking about in this video. On that note, let's talk about sports betting first, because it's probably the most prevalent and easily accessible form of online betting that there is right now, and it's also the one that I'm most informed about and kind of in the loop on. Right off the bat, it shouldn't be that much of a surprise that studies show that people who have problems with sports betting, frequently at least, have a higher likelihood of showing symptoms of like anxiety and depression and loneliness, etc., which are also ironically symptoms that I experience being a Detroit Pistons fan every day of my life. Obviously, a lot of this stems from the fact that sports betting is, in simple terms, pretty much just an addiction. It's, chasing the high of your parlay hitting, the possibility of an unlikely scenario playing out and it making you filthy rich. It's effectively a somewhat more realistic alternative to playing the lottery. There's nothing wrong with it in moderation, but moderation isn't something that exists today, especially not with something like sports betting. I think that's kind of where my fundamental problem comes in with it, because it's borderline impossible to avoid sports betting if you consume any sort of mainstream anything. Like, if you're watching a random show, there's sports betting commercials. If you're scrolling on social media, your favorite creator probably has a partnership with DraftKings or BetMGM or whatever other sites are out there, whether it's disclosed or not, because that is also kind of a problem. If you want to turn the game on, God fucking forbid, because not only are the ads going to be plastered all over the stadium, all over the jerseys, all over the screen, but you turn your volume up, you've got the announcers shilling them just as hard. It creates this really unhealthy loop that I would imagine is almost inescapable if you are somebody who struggles with an addiction to gambling or any sort of problem like that. Of course, you also have to take into consideration that the athletes themselves have gambling company sponsorships, which is absolutely insane, in my opinion. Like, it really kind of feels like the athlete equivalent to congressional stock trading, or like insider trading. Actually, would that make Giannis and his Kalshi partnership the Nancy Pelosi of basketball? Much to think about there. But on the other side of the coin, when talking about the athletes themselves, God, I cannot talk, the rise of sports betting has kind of opened the floodgates for athletes to receive mountains of verbal abuse from mouth-breathing nobodies online, to put it nicely. There's actually a pretty good NCAA.org article about this that I'll link in the description that kind of goes into detail about that, but all in all, sports betting has made some of the worst people in the world way too comfortable with just going online and slinging insults at athletes because of their own decisions to throw away their money on a game that they have no control over. And that's not to say that people weren't horrible to athletes online before all of this started, but it would be a flat-out lie to say that it has not gotten infinitely worse as a result of people losing out on their 20-leg parlay. I moved my chair up, so sorry. Either way, I guess if I were to give my own opinion or take on all of this, I would have to say that I don't particularly want sports betting itself legalized, but I definitely think that there would be a lot less of a mental health crisis surrounding it if, at the very least, advertising it was illegal or even heavily regulated. I don't know, just something that isn't this, because whatever this is a massive problem. Also, before we move on, I have to say that I 100% believe that the Miami Heat accidentally posting LeBron's introductory press conference a couple weeks back was an entirely intentional leak meant to manipulate the betting markets. I have no proof of this whatsoever, but I kind of feel it in my gut. So that's my low stakes conspiracy theory of the day. But that's just sports betting. While I think it's fair to say that it's the most mainstream form of online gambling nowadays, in my eyes, it is definitely not the worst offender. Sites like Kalshi and Polymarket, those markets where you can basically bet on anything from sports to politics to entertainment to AI, yada yada yada. I want to call them societal rot, but I think that is being far, far too kind. Much like the crowd that gets way too invested in sports betting, I think the people who frequent these all-encompassing prediction markets, as they call them, are absolutely deranged. Yet I find myself feeling less bad for them than I do people who do sports betting exclusively. Like, at least with sports bettors, there's a certain benefit of the doubt where you can find yourself maybe chipping in a few bucks to give yourself some stake in a game that you otherwise really wouldn't care about, and then that spirals and you fall down the rabbit hole. But frankly, if you're betting on how many daily YouTube views NBA Youngboy will get, you are already too far gone, and I don't even think you should be allowed to vote, really. Which ironically is what we're talking about next, because in Wisconsin, if you bet on a certain election, you can't vote in that election, because fucking duh! This law is older than any living person, but the subspecies of troglodyte people that run Kalshi got their panties in a bit of a twist over this, calling it voter suppression. Somehow. If you've ever been outside or breathed air before, it really isn't a difficult principle to understand. It's in the same vein as a player participating in a game not being allowed to bet in that same game. Shout out Jonte Porter. But that really boils down to the fact that the people running these sites don't give a flying fuck about anything except lining their pockets with money from society's most gullible and easily influenced people, which again, fucking duh. But still, it's very dystopian in a way, as much as I hate using that term because it sounds corny and it's kind of been done to death. But it does circle back to something I pointed out earlier, which is that this is inescapable if you have any sort of presence on social media and even outside social media in a lot of ways. But pretty much everything is an advertisement for one of these sites, and these advertisements, by and large, tend to be a lot less disclosed than the ones for the sports betting platforms are, if that makes any sort of sense. There's a lot to be said about betting on politics and elections, and it's something I, frankly, don't feel like touching with a 10-foot pole. So, sorry about that, but I do actually want to touch on one thing. As someone who is moderately involved with the electoral news cycle, and by moderately I mean I'm a big-ass nerd about it, I've noticed a pretty concerning trend where people are using these prediction sites, betting odds, as actual tangible polls, and it really doesn't sit right with me. I'm not doing another take. Admittedly, if you I've been way more like tapped into this than I think the average person probably is, because I live in Michigan, and if you haven't been paying attention, our Senate primary is a fucking nightmare right now.
Israel comes to me in my dreams!
Actually, by the time this video is out, the primary will be over, so I guess none of this matters to you, but it matters to me, damn it. It matters to present-day me. Ignoring the polls, at the time of recording, Kalshi has Abdullah Sayed at a 97% chance to win the primary, but my problem with that is that real people walking the same earth as you and I will see something like that, believe it is an actual legitimate poll, and not just betting odds, and be lulled into into a false sense of security about their preferred candidate, and they might not vote as a result. Which, thinking about it now, does make that stupid voter suppression argument way funnier, even ignoring the fact that it's inherently stupid to be allowed to financially benefit from voting a certain way in an election. That's basically my go vote no matter what PSA, so my civic duty is done for the year. But no, seriously, there are plenty of horrific things to say about these prediction markets. I know I'm kind of zeroing in on Kalshi, but can you really blame me for wanting to flame the site that allowed people to bet on food shortages in Gaza, preyed on like 18-year-olds to gamble under the guise of being, what was it, like event contracts instead of gambling sites, and is basically overall the Jedi High Council of insider trading. Can you blame me? Okay, I think I've kind of said my piece about this topic. I know some of this is like surface level analysis, but I kind of just wanted to get on here and rant for a little bit because I really do think that this wave of like predictive market gambling and betting is destroying a society that, let's be honest here, is already being held together by bubblegum and sticks. And it's gonna create nothing but problems for especially young people who are already incredibly susceptible to addiction, which is really the root of my problem here, is that it feels like a lot of the people getting roped into this gambling habit and these addictions are people around my general age, because good lord, we are an easily influenced bunch. If you want to go deeper, we can talk about how this is rooted deeper than advertisements, start a dialogue about stuff like loot boxes in video games that can kind of bridge the path to gambling habits from way too young, but that'd require me to face, that I also might be a part of that problem, and I'm not gonna do that. Alright, that's gonna be all from me for now. If you liked the video, leave a like. If you subscribed the video, leave a subscribe. Sorry, I decided to, like, rub my two neurons together for once and make a semi-serious video, but let me know if you would like to see me form more thoughts in the future. I can do it every now and then. Or if you want me to just, you know, shut up and dribble, stay in my lane, make silly stuff. But until next time, I'm out of here.